All right, as Americans, we are far more focused on ourselves than we were 200 years ago. Hard to believe, right? That's the conclusion of a study published in the journal Psychological Science. With us now to discuss why this may be happening is Fulenwider. She's the editor-in-chief of Marie Claire. Also, John Tierney, a columnist for the New York Times. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Shocking that it's the me generation, right? Well, John, let's talk about this study because what they looked at is words used in books. They looked at over 1 million books, and they found these changes in these languages, in the language, much more self-referential, right?
Right. It's much more about choosing things rather than obligation. It's more about getting than giving. And, you know, it's a really clever study, I think, and it shows why the Victorians were so uptight. I mean, they worried as people moved from villages and farms into cities that, you know, people were away from the churches and the families and the neighbors that had constrained them. And so the Victorians really wanted to develop new codes of morality. They wanted people to have willpower.
Does any of this surprise you?
It's not surprising, but it's an interesting confirmation. I mean, it's a very scientific
confirmation,
thing.
yeah.
I mean, it's easy for us journalists to, you know, to make up trends. It takes 3 points to make a trend, we always say. But this really shows you something over 2 centuries, I think.
But, Anne, what was fascinating was the increase in the words in books of choose and get. More what they called self-centered words. You know, when my children say, I want something, we say, want does not get.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting from the point of view of women, because 200 years ago, the role of women was completely different. And I would actually argue that the role of women 200 years later has been much improved by wanting and getting, and that women actually, I wouldn't say are self-centered, but more self-empowered 200 years later, where we have more in the role of in our marriages, in our careers, we have the vote, and we have actually more to get. We still, as we, last time I was here, we were talking about equal pay. So I would actually encourage women to be a little more selfish.
So there's nothing negative then you think about this me generation as it's been dubbed?
I think we could all use a little more self-discovery. I think that we could use some more self-empowerment, and that women especially, and men, could benefit from even more self-exploration.
Yeah, I think introspection can be good and some sense of self and who you are and what you're about. Let me talk about some of the factors that might have contributed to it, the move from rural to the city. Was that an influence?
That's a big thing because people are cut off. And as Anne says, there's great advantages in having these new choices in the city. I mean, I'm glad my ancestors were obliged to get up in the morning and milk a cow in Ireland. I'm glad that I can sit here instead, really. It's a nice choice to have.
Right.
But you lose something in a sense of community. I mean, I don't think it's an accident that some of the most successful TV shows have been Friends and Seinfeld and Cheers and Girls. These shows where individual people who are kind of lonely in cities find new families. Because we all, I mean, it's great to have all these new choices for everyone, but we also want that sense of community. We kind of evolved around clans, and people miss that.
And what impact has social media had on all this?
Well, I think social media certainly forces all of us, whether you have to do this for your job or just for it forces everyone to become a little bit of a mini brand. And you do have to think about yourself, whether it's your image on Facebook or your witty little quip on Twitter.
How many tweet followers you have?
Never enough, right? And you're always working. In fact, there are books written about how to empower or gain more followers. There's how to become more of a brand, and that can be interpreted as being selfish or self-promoting, and it does force all of us. There was even a study recently about 16-year-olds feeling the pressure of becoming a brand.
But what is the downside of this? I mean, you hear that because there's such a sense of the individual, right? There's such a focus on the me, that there's a lack of a sense on the collective goodwill.
Takes a village.
It takes a village. I would say people are, I mean, I'm a little bit of a I like this self-empowerment idea, but I think people are finding communities online. And yes, you have to disconnect and find your communities. I think cities are collections of little neighborhoods. I mean, I have my community in Brooklyn of friends and neighbors, but I think people are finding like-minded friends online and actually enabling and enacting change online and finding communities. I think that there is a new sense of community.
Yeah, I'm with Anne. I think self-realization, self-awareness, understanding self, and having confidence and believing in self can give you more options and a happier time.
He embodies that, as you know. Which is why we get along.
I think there's always a fear that
it's an idea you're familiar with.
I mean, I think it's great to have those choices and that empowerment, but it's more strain on the individual too, I think.
All right, John Tierney and Fulenwider, fabulous to have both of you here. Thank you so much.